Welcome to the Successful Encore Career presented by Employment for Seniors. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer with Employment for Seniors. This episode sponsored by Nationwide Insurance, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, and Innosource. And with me, as always, Carol Ventresca, Executive Director, Employment for Seniors.
Hello, Brett. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. Yeah. We are ready for the end of 2018. That's 2 years of our podcasting history.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We hope that all of our listeners have enjoyed and learned something from each of our podcasts.
If nothing else, I know I have. I
have too,
yeah.
Needless to say.
Go knee deep in it, yeah.
So we're taking today as an opportunity to help everybody get ready for the new year. We thought long and hard about what we wanted to do. Last year, we talked about new year, new job, and what could we do to start 2019 off on a right foot, and realized that we had a lot of information in all of those podcasts we've done over the past 2 years. And so you came up with this great title for today's event, and it's 9 Tips for 19.
Right. Because we have such a backlog of great podcasts, why not spotlight them?
Exactly. So we have lots to cover today, and let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Well, the first one I think is probably the best one to start off with is that career transition, what our podcast is named after, Encore Career. We had a really good interview with Frank Froz, who went through a tremendous career change from broadcast to going independent, but now he's back into broadcast as well. But his journey is an amazing story.
It was. And we had more fun talking about it. He was kind of all over the place, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
But, sometimes career changes are voluntary and many times they're involuntary. One thing that we learned from Frank is that the key to those career disruptions is to really just jump right back in, immediately move forward through that change. How many times have we heard clients come and say, I just want to hide under the covers. Mm-hmm. I don't want to admit to anybody I lost my job. But, financially, none of us can do that.
Right.
And so we just have to keep going and hit the ground running, find our motivation, find our momentum. We're going to have much more success if we keep that positive attitude. So there were a couple of points that Frank gave us that I thought were key to thinking about if you are dealing right now with a really tough transition. Let's move past the emotion. Our family needs us. We have to keep moving on. So just move past that emotion. Also, do not be afraid to use your network and every contact. I think on one of our podcasts at some point in time, I talked about the gentleman that I heard who literally hid in his house for a year because he was too embarrassed to tell anybody he needed a job. Right. Once his neighbor found out, within 3 months, he was back employed again. Well, he hid for a year. That is not an option. So get back in, use your networks and use your contacts. Think about everything you're involved in, even social organizations, and start talking to people about needing a job. And don't be embarrassed or afraid. There is nothing wrong with the fact that you need to ask for help. Someone is going to come to your aid, and in turn, you are going to help somebody else in the future. So these are all just paying forward steps. Use them, use your contacts, use your networks.
Well, number 2 is transferable skills. Maybe we better reset that and even explain what transferable skills are. We've talked about it a lot, but right. I know I'm familiar with it because of all the podcast episodes that it comes up with. It comes as a discussion point.
Right.
But what are transferable skills?
Well, and to say it simply, a skill is something you learn. How to drive a car. A transferable skill is a skill you've learned that you can take into a new job. So you've learned as a 16-year-old to drive a car. As a 45-year-old or a 55-year-old, you get your CDL license and you can suddenly drive a truck. It's a transferable skill. You've learned to use a computer to do email. Then you suddenly can use that skill to learn to do other computer programs. So why is that important? Particularly for older adults. An employer wants to know what you bring to their table. If you can do the job day one, and to get that information across to them, you have to talk about your skills. Because you've been in the workforce for so long, that's the beauty of it for an older adult. You've got skills. The trick is to understand how they translate or transfer into a new job. And that's the hardest part of what we do and the hardest part of what a mature job seeker has to deal with.
Is to identify them. And to recognize they are worth talking about and lifting themselves up.
Right. So it's very important to your job search. It can strengthen your marketability. If you have good command on what your transferable skills are, you are going to be able to clearly communicate those to an employer. An employer wants to know what you bring to them. If you can understand those skills that you've learned in previous jobs, then you can bring them to a new job. And you can leverage that application, your application to an employer by showing that with all those transferable skills, you are the most qualified candidate. So it all comes into play. It's easy to identify transferable skills. What we all have some difficulty is being able to kind of step back and look at it again, not emotionally. And keep in mind that a skill is not a task. You have to think about what your tasks were, what you accomplished in your job, but you have to then rethink those tasks and what about me? What skills did I possess that I was able to do those tasks? Break down your resume by task and then start thinking about what those skills are. Then when you have a good, firm understanding of those transferable skills, come up with your story. Come up with examples of how you used those skills successfully. And those are called accomplishment statements. What does that mean? Those accomplishment statements become part of your resume. So that your resume is not just a list of tasks. Your resume is a story about everything that you have accomplished. So transferable skills make your job search more logical. It provides you with a strong resume and cover letter. It can enhance your job interview because you have strong statements, your accomplishment statements about your successes, and it lets that employer and interviewer know that you are the best candidate.
So that podcast will give us much more information about this.
Absolutely.
And we'll, I don't think we mentioned it yet, but we'll have links to all these previous podcasts. We're not going to make you go back to our library and look for the specific one.
Exactly.
But look in the podcast show notes for this, in this episode, and we'll have links back to the specific podcast.
Right. And we can also then too link you to resources on the Employment for Seniors website, which is www.employseniors.org. And under client resources, you will find all of our tip sheets, which cover a lot of this information.
Right.
Okay.
Number 3, lifelong learning. We were pleased to have Employment for Seniors board member Marilyn Berry Rice be a guest on that episode and talk about how important it is to keep learning, keep educating yourself.
Exactly.
Take advantage of the opportunities out there that are probably free to better yourself while you have that little bit of time on your hands between jobs, or if you're underemployed, to take advantage of that time to better yourself, to get ready for that next career move.
And this is a really important podcast. Folks, I think, don't understand how important lifelong learning is. And if you keep in mind what is one of the greatest biases against an older adult in the application process is the employers assume you aren't willing to learn or you don't have the ability to learn. So if you can show that you've been a lifelong learner, then that is to your advantage in your job search. Marilyn is the director of the Ohio State University's Alumni Association's Career Management Program. So she's working with alumni of Ohio State literally all over the world in their career changes. And I'm a retiree of Ohio State. So lifelong learning is really embedded in our brain cells that you want to continue learning. But it is just so important to mature job seekers. So everybody looks at me and said, when I talk about this in workshops, they say, well, I can't learn anything. Well, sit back and ask yourself, how long have you been doing email? Did you make an airline reservation online? Did you make a restaurant reservation online or book a hotel room? You have learned to do all of these things. You can do Facebook. And actually, who's on Facebook now are grandmothers. That is the way you show that you can learn. To show an employer, if an employer is assuming you can't learn, to show the employer that you are a qualified applicant, you have to convince them that you have learned new skills, that technology is not
an obstacle.
An obstacle, exactly. Yeah. It's not some nebulous thing out there that you don't want to have to worry about. There was a gentleman who came into our office and he told me that he wanted to be a yard spotter. And I'd never heard of that after 30 some years of working in career services. And a yard spotter is somebody who goes out to literally these great big truck farms and they use a computerized handheld thing to find the truck bed with the inventory that has to go to Chicago. And so they get the truck bed and the driver together. And that's what a yard spotter does. At least that's what he explained to me.
Guess somebody has to do it, don't they?
He had to learn to use that handheld computer to do that. We really want to make sure that mature job seekers have opportunities to learn about computers. That's the biggest thing. And we have a list on our website on how to get computer training. Computer training is easy to find in your community, regardless of where you live. Check with your library. That's the first place to go. But there are a lot of places here in Central Ohio that do either free or very inexpensive computer training. The other part of this also, though, is maybe you're great on a computer, but you want to still show that you have learned something new. So there are programs for older adults, and often they are free. At Ohio State, it's called Program 60. And Columbus State Community College has a version of that program. Otterbein University, which is my alma mater, that's why I keep mentioning it, has programs. So think about updating your writing skills, your communication skills, how to do public speaking. Maybe you need some math or accounting to learn how to do Excel spreadsheets. You could take a leadership program or how to do teaching or tutoring. There are lots of things that you can take. And when we did our podcast last year, we have found out about another new resource. And I just want to mention this. Columbus Metropolitan Library, which is one of the top libraries in the country, has a new relationship with the online courses called Lynda, Lynda. Lynda courses normally have a cost, but if you go through to the Lynda website by being on the Columbus Metropolitan Library website resources page, you can do a Lynda course, and there are literally tens of thousands of courses on Lynda, lynda.com. You can do them for free. So no excuse. It's not going to cost you anything. You just have to try to do it.
You may see a pattern as we go through these podcasts that we are spotlighting podcasts that we're interviewing people and we're showcasing their expertise in different areas. And this next one may have been one of the best ones that we did preparing for an interview, not only as an important topic, but Deb did no hold barred, down and dirty. This is what you got to do.
Exactly.
Deb did a great job. And I think listening to this episode, you will be prepared.
Absolutely. If you want tips on how to interview, go to our interview with Deb Shanoski, and it was on April 17th of 2017. Deb is the director of the AARP Workforce, AARP Foundation Workforce Program called CSEPT here in Columbus. But Deb had also previously been with Goodwill Columbus. She knows interviewing. So I'm only going to give you the 5 basic things that she said to keep in mind, but that podcast is just full of tips. So I encourage you to go back and listen. But here are the 5 things that she said are absolutes. Before you're going to interview, de-stress. Just use whatever technique you have for relaxation, deep breathing, visualization, whatever works for you. She said, except alcohol, unfortunately, but you have to de-stress. My comment to clients is think of this interview as a learning experience and have fun with it. I think in some ways that kind of comes out the same way. The results are the same. You want to go into an interview with a clear head, so de-stress. Be sure your application materials are perfect. Your resume, cover letters, whatever you've got done, references that you've pulled together, whatever you give to that employer, make sure they are perfect. Do not do a resume by yourself. Have people help you. Have folks check. We all have typos. Believe me, I found typos on my resume. You've got to have help. The third step, ensure that you have a professional interviewing dress or suit and in which you are comfortable. So always dress one step above the supervisor. Everybody keeps talking about, oh, you don't have to be formal in dressing for an interview. You could make a huge faux pas in doing that because number one, if somebody tells you that you don't have to be formal, you don't exactly know what that means for that individual. So always err on the side of being more conservative and dress for success when you go into an interview, but be comfortable. Ladies, don't put on stacked high heel shoes if you're not comfortable wearing them. The fourth point, do a dry run past the location where the interview is going to be. Don't get lost getting there. That is not an excuse to use for being late. Always arrive at an interview 10 minutes early. And the last point, practice your answers to commonly asked interview questions out loud. Don't think of them in your head. Say them out loud and make sure that it's going to come out, flowing out of you. Not that you're going to be having difficulty saying the words. Do a mock interview. Do informational interviews. They're great preparatory tools. Read and memorizing your answers is not good enough. You want to be believable. So you have to make sure that the interview questions are in your head. Make sure that your answers are natural as they're coming out. So you want to practice that. You want to make sure that the employer understands what you're saying. And again, that you have a believable answer. And do check out that podcast.
All right. Volunteer Week. Employment for Seniors would be nothing without our volunteers.
Oh my gosh.
If you think about it, I mean, yes, you three could do the job, but not very well.
For those of you who do not know Employment for Seniors, we only have 3 staff members, and we take care of anywhere from 500 to 1,000 new clients, plus our 5,000 client database, plus 600 employers and everybody in the city of Columbus who has a question about helping older adults find jobs. We have the greatest team of volunteers possible. It's amazing to me how many people are unemployed who tell me they don't have time to volunteer. Now, bottom line is, if you are unemployed and you are sitting in front of your computer 8 hours a day on Monster or Indeed or wherever looking for a job, you are not going to find a job, or you're going to find one you really don't want. You have to be out. You have to meet people. You have to network. And what better way to do that than to also be volunteering at a nonprofit agency in your community where you are also learning a new skill? There you go. As a job seeker, you need to learn new skills. Do it as a volunteer. You can update your communication skills. Maybe you are really good at carrying out projects and plans, and you can do that with a nonprofit. Take on a leadership role, be a team leader, or even do management skills and tasks with a nonprofit. You're going to hone your written skills, analysis, data measure, and management. Being a volunteer opens up new opportunities to new career areas. You may not have ever thought about working for a nonprofit, and suddenly you love this place. So you're going to try to pursue a job even where you're volunteering. So you want to try to be a good volunteer, go a step above, and make sure that they understand too that you are on the job hunt, because they also make great references. Our volunteer team, many of our volunteers have gone off to work, and that's because we give great references. A couple of other tips. By volunteering, it closes gaps on your resume. If you are in a volunteer position and you are using professional skills, now you don't have to be a manager, you don't have to be a leader, but you're using professional skills, you can put that on your resume and it closes up gaps. It opens up your network. It helps you look for jobs in new career areas. The other big thing about volunteering is you're finding unposted jobs. Only about half of the jobs that are available are actually posted anywhere. You're going to find some opportunities that you wouldn't have known about over and above having been a volunteer. It also kind of plans your day. You're not sitting at home looking at the same four walls. You're giving back to your community. You're interacting with other people. You're also broadening your perspective of the world. Volunteering is critical in your job search. And if you're interested in volunteering for employment for seniors, you give me a call.
Well, we mentioned a little earlier about preparing for an interview. I think there are some mindsets going into the interview itself. And we had a really good podcast with David Taylor entitled Managing Interview Expectations. And each interview is different, of course, but I think for ourselves, we can manage what we are expecting out of that interview to know what's going to happen afterwards, what to do to help prepare yourself when you exit the interview, what you should do next and such. I think there's a myriad of levels of managing that interview expectation that David did a great job of covering.
Oh, he did a marvelous job. And the most fun I had of putting together today's program was to go back and listen to some of these. David is a longtime HR guy, and he really understands the issues in hiring. I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to this podcast. And there's so much, I can't go over all of it, but I'm just going to give you some highlights. And over and above everything else, David brought up, which I thought, boy, this is an important message, and we forget to tell people. When you are in the middle of a job search, again, get rid of the emotional part of this and think about all of your applications and your process and your resumes from the perspective of the interviewer, recruiter, employer. You have put your heart and soul into your resume, and it's going to employer XYZ, but employer XYZ has 1,000 resumes in their database. They are not going to put that same emphasis on yours that you do. And so again, it's really rethinking the process, and therefore it's easier to also manage your expectations better. Your resume goes into an application. It goes into cyberspace. You have no clue as to what the resources are that employer has and whether they are going to get back to you. So don't assume that they are going to call you the next day and offer you the job, because you're just going to be disappointed. So just work through the system and do your follow-up. That's where you can make great contacts with the employer without pestering them, but that, again, you can manage your expectations. I know you believe that you're the perfect candidate, but you want to make sure that they see your resume. They're going to see your resume if the resume fits the job description that you've applied for. If your resume talks about that you want to be a teacher, but you've applied for a job to be a receptionist, they're not going to look at it. So the resume needs to fit the job description clearly, not that you think it does, but it clearly has to do that. So nobody got back to you. Well, don't have that expectation that they will. Again, they have lots and lots of people applying for jobs that are not qualified for the jobs. And so they're going to only give you 7 seconds. So don't expect anything unless in 7 seconds you've proven that you're the best candidate. One huge issue for all of us is you didn't get the job and you don't know why. And the first preconceived notion you have is it's age bias. Well, it may not have been. The person who got the job could be older than you. The person who got the job could have gotten an internal promotion. So you're just not in the loop because you don't already work there. And you don't know that. You likely will never find that out. It could have been where that company has some kind of a hiring referral system, so that the person who got the job came through another employee. There's a tip. Make sure you have used your network, that if you've applied for a job at XYZ company, You've contacted anybody you know at that company and try to become an internal referral. So don't be discouraged, and chances are you're not going to know why you didn't get the job. And one of David's most important tips on this is don't burn your bridges. Don't call them and demand knowing why you didn't get the job, because say that person didn't work out. They may call you because they're interested that you are number 2 and they want you to come. Don't burn your bridges. So be very, very careful. Be gracious in exiting out of the process. Some tips overall. And as I said earlier, this is a really good podcast. So I hope you'll go back and listen. But some tips that David gave. Companies have different abilities. They have different time to spend on the process, priorities, and resources. You don't know that. So don't make any assumption that they are going to be on your doorstep the next day. Do your research and try to determine what the culture is at that company. And that could give you some insight on what to expect from them and how they treat their employees. You want to know that. And if they're not treating their employees well, they're not going to be probably very good at the process either. But don't make expectations. Adjust your assumptions. Check the websites and do your research on things like Glassdoor and Ohio Means Jobs. You might be able to find out a little bit more about them. And again, helping you figure out what you should expect and not expect.
Well, the next one we want to spotlight is the interview we did with Ken Lazar earlier in 2018, the 30-second elevator speech. And that does come into play with a lot of the other topics we just talked about, like the volunteer opportunities and everything you do outside of the job search. You do need to explain what your situation is at that point in time as a 30-second elevator speech. You also need to, look at it as a networking opportunity to speak to someone about where you are right now. Comes into play very importantly with a lot of different aspects of your life overall. And I think that was a really good interview with him to talk about how important it is and how to put it together. Right.
And I think too that, it's a really great example, again, of how preparing yourself for your job search is not only going to make you a better job searcher, it's going to likely help you become successful much quicker in your job search and like the company better that you're going to. Folks who do kind of a haphazard process of looking for a job usually end up hopping from job to job to job because they end up not liking what they're doing because they didn't do a good job. A 30-second elevator speech is called a lot of different things. And as Ken said, it doesn't have to be 30 seconds. It could be 10 seconds as long as it's good information.
But it's just somebody branded that eventually a while back and it's stuck.
Name of a book or something.
Sure, exactly.
But what you're trying to do is make sure that you have a good, easy, logical way to introduce yourself in any situation, in a networking event, at a job fair, in an interview. And you're basically answering the question, what do you do? That's what an employer wants to know. That's what a networking contact wants to know. Because particularly in terms of being in a networking context, if you're talking to somebody about your job search and you can't tell them, what do you do? What do you want to do? They can't help you. And so you're trying to get as much information across about your skills, your abilities, what you're interested in a clear, concise manner that someone is going to be excited about. You want them to be motivated to help you. You want that employer to be motivated to hire you. So it has to be something also interesting. But again, no more than 30 seconds. Don't get that glassy-eyed look from the person you're talking to. Don't overstep your where you are or wear out your welcome.
We have probably one of the premier career expos in Central Ohio.
Yes.
I know we're biased, of course, with that. But I think Central Ohio is rich with career fairs, with job expos, however you want to title them. But this is a great opportunity for a job seeker to have the opportunity of the one-on-one discussion.
Exactly.
With the employer. And I think that's the biggest thing we stress with career fairs, job expos, again, whatever you want to call them, is we hear all this feedback from job seekers that they don't get to talk to people. They don't get to talk to people. It's only filling out an application and it goes into the cloud and you never get to speak to anyone. Well, these career expos are the perfect opportunity to talk to people.
Exactly.
To talk to recruiters.
How many times do folks say, I can't get into the door for an interview? Right. Well, here you go.
Right.
Last year's job fair, the August of this year's job fair, we had over 70 employers and 600 clients talking to them. They had lots of time to talk to all of these wonderful employers. And an employer is not at a job fair unless they want to be. Even if the job fair didn't cost them anything, it costs them time. Their recruiting staff is out of the office. They're not getting jobs filled because they're waiting to meet you. So it's not a waste of your time. Job fair, I think job fairs are incredible. Plus the fact, again, it's a learning experience. You learn about employers that you didn't know about, and you get to practice your interviewing, make sure your resume's on target, all of those kinds of things that help make you a better job seeker. Before you go to a job fair, just make sure you've also clarified your goals. If you're only looking for part-time work, don't just go to the employers you think have only part-time jobs, because you never really know. What you're trying to do is clarify your goals in the kind of employer that you want to work for, the kind of job that you're interested in. But also realize that take advantage of talking to those employers, because not all jobs are posted. So if you are interested in a company, even if you think they're not interested in you, go and talk to somebody. And doing that in a job fair is an easy way to do it. Do your research. Identify those companies. Make sure you know who you plan to target. We had 70 employers. You're going to target probably 10 that you are definitely going to talk to. And then you have another 10 that you want to talk to, and another 10. So you have prioritized who you want to talk to. And then if you get to see all 70, great. Chances are pretty good. You're not going to be able to see everybody, but you want to make sure you've seen the employers that are of interest to you. But that takes research and reviewing their websites. Have some questions to ask them. They are going to know that you are truly interested, not just in them and in their job, but in working, and that you are trying to continue your career. If you've got questions for them, if you, and let me also qualify that by saying, if you walk up to them and say, what do you do to an employer? That's not a question.
Wrong question.
Wrong question. That means you didn't do your homework. So go in, for instance, say you and an employer have a great conversation. Ask them, what are the next steps? Then you know what expectations to have. So it goes back to our previous tip. Ask the employer what the next steps are. Make sure you've got that 30-second elevator speech or 1-minute commercial, whatever you call it. Again, don't forget, first impressions are golden, and you can only make a good first impression once. So go with a practiced 1-minute, 30-second commercial about yourself.
And I think it goes the other way as well. That if you're not impressed with the way that the recruiter is presenting themselves, maybe that's a job, a place you do not want to work. So this is a two-way street in a career fair.
Exactly. And I think it is very likely you are going to learn a lot about an employer at a job fair. Right. Oftentimes we have a local grocer who is at nearly every job fair. Well, they have, hundreds of stores and thousands of people working for them, and there's always turnaround. And again, people look at me and say, I don't want to work in the grocery store. Well, you don't know what else is open. And so take advantage of talking to this great employer who probably has some good piece of advice for you. Sure. So during the day of the fair, dress appropriately, always dress professional. This past year, we had a photographer doing free headshots. So everybody came looking just spiffed to the nines and got their free headshot, and they were wonderful. The pictures were tremendous. So take advantage of all the other services that are going on at the job fair too. Go to the workshops that they have. But when you're talking to those employers, show your interest in them. Be enthusiastic. Be appreciative. You want to have a positive attitude. Ask permission to leave a resume. Yes, they often will just tell you, go to our online website. Don't be offended by that. That's their process of how to keep track. Again, it's not just your resume. It is thousands of people applying for jobs. But the materials that you do have to be perfect. Also, in a job fair, keep moving down the line. Do not overwear your welcome. Don't talk about family. Don't talk about your grandkids. Don't talk about aches and pains. It's not a health fair. It is a job fair. So go professional. Within a day after the job fair, do your follow-up. And a week after the job fair, you can do a second follow-up. But also, don't forget that network. Go out there and make sure that if XYZ was there and I really want to work for them, find out who you know that works at XYZ.
We've made it to number 9.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. We did it.
And we touched upon it a little bit in this previous episode about LinkedIn. And this is what it's about, LinkedIn the Headshot, so at the career fair.
Right.
This is probably one social media platform a lot of people forget about as a resource, I think.
Could be.
They just don't prioritize it. Let's put it that way.
Or they use it like Facebook, which is not good.
Right. And so therefore the priorities are a little bit different. And it is a social media platform that you don't have to visit as often as you do your Facebook page. But it's becoming more and more important, in regards to making sure you look the best that you can while you're there, because people are looking at you there passively. You don't even know what's going on.
Right.
And they're popping on your LinkedIn page. And if it doesn't look good, you're not going to get another look.
Exactly. So that leads to a couple of direct things. Number one, as with expectations in your job search, how do you make sure you've got a good resume? The one thing you always have to do with LinkedIn is think in terms of the perspective of who's reading it. Folks, again, say, oh, I don't want to put my picture up there because they're going to know I'm old. Well, guess what? As soon as you get into that interview, they're going to kind of take that guess. Yeah. So LinkedIn is not meant to hurt you. It can help you, but you have lots of work to do and research and make sure you're on the right track. Our Sharon Hammersley, who helped us with this podcast, does our LinkedIn workshops, and it's critical to get people to help you. And believe me, I'm on her doorstep all the time and about LinkedIn questions.
Well, it's a free resource.
Exactly. So take advantage of it. So I said, think of the perspective of the recruiters. Your resume or your LinkedIn page is not the only one the employer is seeing. This is actually a way for a recruiter to literally find the needle in the haystack. So as opposed to trying to go through tons and tons of resumes, they can go into LinkedIn with ways that they can pull by keywords who's qualified for the jobs that they have. So it's much more cost effective for the employer, plus time effective, to use a social media like this. You can put lots of information and content onto the LinkedIn that would never fit on your resume and would never even be appropriate on a resume. So take advantage. So, first thing, get that targeted headline, which is right under your name, so that an employer understands what you're doing with your profile. Always remember that it's all keywords, and that's how this thing is driven, is by the keywords. Yes, you have to do a headshot. As I said, they're going to know you're older one way or the other. So get a good professionally done picture headshot, and it's going to be great. Right in the first person. And I thought that was an interesting issue that Sharon brought up, because a resume is in the third person. So you have to translate all that information into the first person. It's you talking to the person who's reading your page. You have to sell yourself in that summary. You can ask a question, but you have to be compelling. It's a real short space to fill, but it's very, very important. So you have to engage that reader. One of the things I used to tell my students, for every bullet point on a resume, every bullet point has to be compelling enough to get the person to read the next bullet point, or else they're going to start skipping around. You don't want folks to skip around on your LinkedIn profile. Explain how you can help that employer, how you can help them meet their challenges and what they need to have done. So you are showing the value that you bring to them. And one of the things Sharon talked about is create a help offered ad, as opposed to I want a job. Your message is, I can help you do that. It's a help offered ad. Your LinkedIn profile has more than what a resume can have. It can be like a portfolio. So you want to make sure that you've got certificates that you may have done. Say you wrote a white paper, articles that you'd written, if you created a website, all those kinds of things can be added to your LinkedIn profile. It will go up to 50 skills can be listed. Now, I don't know about you, but I probably don't have 50 skills I'd want to list on my LinkedIn profile. You don't need that many, but you want to be able to list those skills and make sure, again, that it's picked up on the keyword searches. And you also want to to highlight the top skills and make sure there's lots going around about those top skills on your profile so that they will pick up on that information. If you get endorsements and recommendations, even better. It's a quick thumbs up on how people think that you are valuable and that you would be valuable to a new employer. But you also want to stay connected. You want to use LinkedIn as a great way to build your network, but it's quality, not quantity. I have way too many people that I'm linked to on my LinkedIn profile. That's not what you're after. You are after people that you really can relate to, that can understand the value that you are bringing to a new employer. One other thing that Sharon mentioned is there are things that LinkedIn always tries to push you into paying for. As a job searcher, you don't need that extra bill. And there is lots of service that you can get from LinkedIn that you don't have to pay for. So just work it, really understand what you're doing, get help with it, but you don't have to pay for it. Goodness, Brett, we did it.
We did.
9 tips for 2019.
Yeah.
So I put a quick summary of the things that we've talked about. So finding a job is a formal process. And to be a successful job seeker, you have to do some homework. You really want to make sure that you are honing in on your accomplishments and make sure that folks understand how valuable you are going to be as a job seeker. Gather the information and resources you need. Get agencies like Employment for Seniors to help you. And we have a lot of agencies in Central Ohio that will be a benefit. And in your local community, if you're not in Central Ohio, there are places you can go. If you're really having difficulty, contact us and we will help see if we can help you find some places to get some help. Be sure that you have all of the job search materials done and they are perfect. Your resume, your cover letters, your portfolio, whatever it is. And also realize interviewing takes practice. I can't tell you how many clients I have who tell me, I got the interviews, I just can't get the job. Well, there's something going on in that interviewing step. And so you really need to make sure you're on track. Discover ways to update your skills. Learn something new. There are lots of ways to do that. That's not going to cost you any money. You can probably do most of it from home in front of your own computer, but show an employer that you can learn, you are able to learn, and you are willing to learn, because in today's job market, every job changes dramatically and constantly. So you have to be able to learn. Open up your new network. And make sure that network is continually growing, and use volunteering as an opportunity to expand. Get that elevator speech ready. As Ken told us, answer the question, what do I do? But that elevator speech is going to get your foot in the door of talking to employers. It's going to help you in your networking. It is possibly going to give you information on the hidden job market and really help you at job fairs. So get that little elevator speech or your 30-second commercial together. And last but not least, do not shun social media. Yeah, it can be painful, but LinkedIn is important. So use LinkedIn and any other networking or internet opportunity to be a successful job searcher.
Maybe call it a professional media.
Yeah,
rename it in your own little world. You know, and it's not really social anyway. It's a professional media.
That's true. For LinkedIn, that's absolutely true.
And just don't not take advantage of free opportunities.
Well, we really encourage everybody to look at all of our podcasts. And if you have an idea for a podcast that we haven't covered, let us know. We'd be glad to research it and pull it together.
And we'd be glad to have you share our episodes as well. If you know someone in a similar situation, or that you've gotten a job and someone in your circle is now looking and you got advice from what we put together and they can help them, please share. And,
because our tips really are for any job seeker, not just older job seekers, although many of our clients do need to hear these things.
But a lot of ideas and concepts will be applicable to a 25-year-old to a 75-year-old.
Well, and it also gives us a chance to shout out to all of those who have helped us put those podcasts together. For Ken and Deb and Marilyn and everybody else that has helped us, we appreciate their support. These are free, so listen anytime.